we are sharing stories, and I did have to just share my quick story about the sprees, and these were bought by my brother, and he's like, I got sprees, and the kids are eating the sprees, and I said, sprees, and I said, oh yeah, of course. My memory of King Ridge was going up the T-bar or where the Mad Hatter was and dodging the sprees, and people would spit the sprees out, and then they would melt, and then you would run them over your skis, and they would make a big long line of the different colors of the sprees, and sometimes you could dodge them around, and you'd have to be careful, because if you dodged too far, you would go over the side, and then the T-bar would come way back out, and sometimes you'd fall, sometimes you'd get yanked back up. Yeah, so that was a really great thing, and something I haven't thought about for a really long time, and hopefully that is an example of some of the stories that we can hear from the beginning of King Ridge, from the middle of King Ridge, and towards the end of King Ridge. And we're so glad you're here, and I will hand it over now to Ashley Lords.
Hello. Thank you, Putnam. For the few faces that I don't know, my name is Ashley Siebold. Around these parts, I go by Bud's granddaughter, Lori's daughter, Pete's niece. It's usually how I introduce myself, but it is really, really, really wonderful to have you all here tonight. My role is what we affectionately refer to in my family as the hook, which is to try to get you guys out of here in an hour and a half so we don't have to feed you breakfast tomorrow morning, because we've got some talkers up here. So we've got a few folks I'm going to introduce one by one, who are going to share some memories of King Ridge, and then we really want to turn it over and hear it from you guys and hear your memories and stories. And so many of you have brought unbelievable memorabilia, the signs. We've got pictures, and it's really, really wonderful to see. So thank you, but we do hope that you'll share some stories too. So, without further ado, the first person who will be speaking is a woman by the name of Lori Lauritsen, who you may or may not know. My mom had been with King Ridge really right from the beginning, on and off, straight through until King Ridge closed, working in the ski school with some pretty long stretches in between her being at Mount Snow. So I'm going to turn it over to my mom to share some memories. Yeah, that's on.
You have to remember that I started teaching skiing over very noisy snow guns. So if I get too loud, tell me to throw this away. My memories, and Pete's too, I'm sure, go back before King Ridge, when we were skiing at the little northeast slopes down on Bunker Road. And Dad coming home from managing that and teaching the college girls, and he'd say, there's not enough room. We need a bigger ski area. What are we going to do? And then I think for at least 10 years of our lives, every night in the summer, Dad would put us in a Model T or a Model A, and we'd drive around the countryside looking at hills and watching the contours and going, Pete, what do you think? Could you ski that? And finally he went to Dr. Bill Clough and said, Bill, we've outgrown the rope tows. We need something more. So Bill wasn't convinced, and I have Dr. Bill Clough's transcript when the town interviewed him about the history of the outing club and then King Ridge. And he does give Dad credit. He said, Bud had to convince me, but he did, and they finally found the piece over on King Hill, owned by several messers, but then what in town wasn't owned by a messer in those days? And they brought in Sal Hanna, who was a ski area architect. Is that right? Yeah, consultant architect, and he helped lay out the plan and said, you know, you can drive to the top, have your parking lot at the top, and then ski down. That'll make it very unique. And it was unique because they said Mount Washington has the wildest weather on earth. The top of King Ridge, that parking lot, right guys? At 5 o'clock when it's sub-zero and windy, it was brutal. So that's how, a quick thing on how that evolved. It, we not only drove around the countryside, once they found the spot, we first started driving in where, off of Hominy Pot Road, where, what's that called, Mountainside? That little development, and we'd walk. And we found the biggest rock I have ever seen. Do you remember that, Pete? I swear, I can't find it either. Does anybody here live at Mountainside? No. Chris Stearns or somebody, is he here? I'd love to know if anybody who has kids, if the kids ever found it. I swear this boulder was as big as this building. And it looked like it from Mom's pictures, and I haven't gone through those yet. But, and then we would walk. Pardon?
The rock is still there.
It is.
No one moved it?
You didn't move it, Don? Maybe the Sutton Conservation Commission knows where it is.
We don't know.
It's in Sutton.
I know.
It's somewhere between the bottom of the north side T-bar and the east side T-bar.
Very far off of Hominy Pot Road, but it's on one of the locks.
Oh, yeah. But that was huge. And then we started walking from King Hill Road, where the current road is. But it was just a path then, made by, anybody want to guess what the path was made by that we followed up the hill? Deer. Yep, it was a deer path. And crossed little brooks and streams and meandered up, and Pete knows how that meanders. He had a hard time meandering down it in his go-kart one night, or go-kart or motorcycle. Yeah. So we had great times at King Ridge. Everybody was one big happy family. And sometimes, as families are, we weren't always happy with each other, but we worked it out, and everybody had your back, and you had everybody else's back. And if you just wanted to drop your kids at the Ridge for the day, you could do it and know that there was a whole village with their eyeballs on your kid, and they never got away with anything, or rarely. And there's a picture, oh, maybe it's that board over there, of Ralph Graham, who was the lift attendant at the base of the double chair. Ralph would wear a cowboy hat in the better weather. He built snow castles that he'd let you go through. And he knew every kid in town. He knew their parents. He probably knew their phone numbers. And if those kids were stepping out of line, you found out about it. But he was wonderful. There were just so many great people up there. Fred Duford, who managed the maintenance end of it. Joni Wallen, are you here?
No, she's on the vineyard.
She has a nerve. Ah, she's been there before. Joni got involved very early on with the ski patrol, eventually ran the ski patrol, and I think she was there almost until the last day. Who else? Delbert. And stand up, Bill Taylor. Bill Taylor loaded the J-bar, beginner lift J-bar, and Bill would tell you, now you just grab right on. And people would grab right onto that pole and pull themselves down, and they'd be on the ground. But after he said grab the bar, he did say stand up, but by then it was too late. And who else did we have? Fred and Phil Parker. Yeah. Bill Brundle. Yep, on the ski patrol. Marge Thompson, Mary Foley. Oh yeah, Sid Badminton in The Office. I bet the Bardsley kids remember Sid. And Nils and Jenny and Christy Bardsley, Bill's 3 kids, are here tonight, and they brought a nice collection of things. They also brought, and I'll give a little plug here, I don't know, about 15 years ago, 20? Their dad, Bill Bardsley, our manager for almost the whole time, put together this cute booklet. And he brought a box of them, and it's donating them to the Ice House, and the Ice House can sell them for $10 each as a fundraiser for the Ice House. Thank you. But this one's Pete, and that one's mine. I already paid. Yeah. So thank you, Nils and Jenny and Christy.
What year was this? Did the whole thing get started?
Oh, 61, December 23rd. Thank you. 1961 was opening day. The last day of operation was March 12th, 1995. Yep, it was. Is Maura here? Maura Gorman? No, Mom. She was the last ski school director, so I worked under, I don't know, quite a few. I think all the ski school directors. Maura was the last one and then went over to the big mountain across the lake and continued her career there. I was hoping she'd be here. She has wonderful stories.
How did they get the land
I've got it written down here. Initially, the outing club put some money in, and Colby did not come on board right away, and Dad was very specific. No financial help at this time. 300 acres at King Hill. That was November of '59, so it did take Colby some convincing. And then they sold stock. Am I correct? Yeah. Well, that was the last gasp stock. Yeah. We tried. I guess we didn't try hard enough, but yeah. So, how many of you skied at King Ridge? How many of you taught skiing at King Ridge? Mark, Penny Emeny, Mark Mordecai, Linda Sargent, Janice Wallace, yes. I can't see who's in back. Oh, Gary. Gary, we've got a picture of you up there, but you wouldn't recognize him because
Don't tell him.
he was in costume.
We don't want the kids to know that.
Oh, yeah, I know. We had to, yeah, just like Disneyland. Yeah. Oh, M.
My mama.
Yeah. M, you taught. How many worked in the lodge? For Steve. How many of you were able to get Steve Northrup's recipe for his donuts? I would die for that. Rusty Chandler and Rusty was one of the ski school directors towards the end. And Rusty and I would race each other in the morning down to that smelly creosote smelling lodge to get one of Steve Northrup's fresh donuts right out of the fat. Oh God, they were good. Yeah. Okay. So feel free to pop up and say, oh, I remember, do you remember, whatever. And I'm going to turn it over to
Me.
Oh, to Ashley.
She
My
didn't
girl
read my
Ashley.
notes. She didn't read my notes. All right, we are going to move on to Bob Williams. Bob managed food services and events for the last 4 years that King Ridge was around, but has obviously been in the area for 50 or so years. So he's got many stories. One of my fondest memories is actually the smell of the creosote lodge. I can still smell it, and I love that smell. And certainly going in and getting a burger and hot dogs in there. So, Bob, over to you.
So now I'm going to bounce around on my notes. I had this thing all set up chronologically and stuff, and things are popping in and out. One of the sounds I used to hear every day in that creosote-soaked lodge was thump, thump. People would come off the slopes with snow on the bottom of their skis, and down they'd go. And I go, we got one down up in the upper lodge, you know, and somebody would head up and pick so-and-so up and clean up their boots and get them going again, you know. No, that was a great sound, obviously. So I skied at the Ridge in the 70s and the 80s and stuff. I didn't really get involved working there until the early 90s. But I'd like to go way, way back to Colby Junior College. Colby Junior. My mother skied in that little place down in Pleasant Lake, you know, and all that stuff. So then we fast forward to the 70s, 68, 69, and 70, those 3 summers. My younger brother, Jack, worked up there in the maintenance crew, basically. And he built the nursery above Bill Bardsley and Sid Babington's office with Stan Hall, who happened to be the resident carpenter at the time, from Grantham. And Jack he did all the staining on the Hatter House that year. So for 3 summers, that was his summer job at the age of, he was born in, he's 5 years behind me, and I'm 76 this year, so, whatever. So and then he would come down to the Gray House, and he'd flip burgers at nighttime, and on the way out, he would make a couple of lobster salad sandwiches and stick them in his bag for the next day, thinking he was getting away with something. And Arthur Prescott didn't miss a thing. Arthur Prescott owned it at the time, and at the end of the summer, he goes, I think your brother's had enough lobster salad for 1 year. Yeah, I'm with you on that. So, and then Jack was on the ski patrol for 7 years and everything else. So now we're going to fast forward a little bit more into the mid-'80s. And now I'm at the Gray House, and we started the Sunday afternoon business races. I don't know if anybody remembers that or not, but we would put Annie Ballins in the back there. She raced in one of the teams. So the rules were 6 racers, a minimum of 2 women on each team. You could have more if you wanted to, but you had to have at least 2 women on your team. And we'd go up there on a Sunday afternoon, and somebody would set a course, I believe, on the Mad Hatter, probably had the most pitch to it. And there was probably 10, 12 teams involved each week. And so they'd race, and then they would want to have the results, and they thought they'd go back up to the Hatter House for the results. But I convinced them all that they could get a reduction on the cost of their beer if they went down to the Gray House. And I took 2 6-packs to the judges who were in their and said, you sit here for an hour and drink these and do the judging. So then they would come an hour later, and I'd already had 60 people in there having cocktails. And what do you think we gave for first place? 2 6-packs of beer. So the Sunday afternoons for a few years, there was a lot of fun, and there were you would be amazed at the ability of some of the skiers who would come out and just race in that Sunday afternoon thing. It was just, I was always blown away. I mean, I could turn my boards, but things got in the way, like bumps and trees and things, but these guys could ski, and it was a blast to watch them. So we'll go forward now out of the 80s, and Gray House days for me ended in 91. And at that time, Robin, my wife, had taken over as the Sid Babington. She was the ticket lady, working for, I believe, Dick Whitney or John Burrell. Dick Whitney had taken. So we go Bill Bardsley first, general manager, John Burrell next, then Dick Whitney came in. And Dick was there, I think, 3 years or so, maybe 4. And Robin was the ticket lady. So I'm done. I'm out of the Gray House. I'm looking for a job, and Steve Northrup, who had been the food and beverage manager for, without exaggeration, probably 20 years, had said he was done. So they were looking for a food and beverage manager. I think I can do that. So I started in 92. I was there in 92, 93, 94, 95. And we did a lot. Unfortunately, one thing I did get rid of was those stinky fry-later made donuts. But like an idiot, you always think you have a better answer. So I would get the donuts made at Fred's over in Franklin or Tilton. Not Fred's, I'm sorry. Brothers Donut Shop over in Franklin. Delivered to the little store down in Andover. I'd be there at 6:30, meet the truck, get the 3 trays of donuts, bring them up, park in the little loop by the Mad Hatter, walk down the trail, falling down like everybody else and carrying trays of donuts. And then the next day, throw away 2 dozen that didn't get eaten, but bring in 3 more trays, But so that's where the cinnamon donuts went. But I made sure we had donuts. So I don't want to lose my train of thought here. So 92, 93, Robin and I also had a catering company going on from Grey House days. So we decided we'd continue it up at King Ridge. And I would say in the 4 years that I was there, we did well over 100 different type things, whether weddings or wedding receptions. The Summer Music Association was there, and they would have different singers come in or bands or whatever, and we would have dinner available and stuff. So that went on for 3 or 4 years. As we got near the end, and I also want people to understand that the Ridge closed in 95, and I guarantee you it was not because of the food. I mean, I'm not going to wear that. I'm not going to take that off, all right? So, and then lots of things, lots of fun little stories that I will not tell for certain reasons. But Maura Gorman was so all right. So we get to 95, and it's the fall of 95. The winter's coming on, and the new general manager and assistant general manager are coming into work, and we don't know who they are. And they call a preseason managers meeting. So anybody that had anything to do with any piece of management, and we're sitting around a big table like this, and a gentleman walks in, another woman walks in, and the guy starts, he didn't introduce himself. He just talked and told what was going to happen and how he's going to run the mountain and how and he put his hands on your shoulders. I'm going to embellish, I'm going to have you're going to take on your portion of this thing, and you're going to make it, you're going to really dig deep and stuff. So he gets all done going around this thing. And I finally turned back and go, and by the way, who are you? And he goes, oh, by the way, my name is Stuart Collins. I'm the new general manager. I thought Larry Ballin was going to pee his pants. He was laughing so hard when I said that to the guy. It was absolutely perfect. So Stuart and Deb took it and it was Deborah, I believe. I called her Debbie once, and that didn't go very well either. But I ran the part of the business that they had to eat, and they liked the little bar too. So they were always nice and they were friendly to me. So Maura Gorman, Maura was, I believe, that was her year also as the ski school head instructor. And with new management, there's always hiccups and bumps in the road. So, my office was probably the size of these 2 seats in this desk, and that was it. It was at least 2 or 3 times a week. Maura would come in, shut the door, and go, "Talk me down off the ledge quickly." So the 2 of us would talk it out and what went on and how we're going to fix things, and on we go. So you have to understand too. Now, upside down mountain, you're parking on the top and stuff like that. So I used to tell people, come to King Ridge. We'll give you the first run for nothing. You just ski down and walk back up, then buy a ticket if you want to do it. You don't want to do that again. And you have to understand now, to get deliveries to the main lodge where we were located, so you come in and you couldn't drive a truck down there. So the big semi trucks would come up. There'd be 200 cases 3 times a week coming in on the ski season. Would go to the maintenance shed, unload everything, stack it all in a long row, and I'd come down with my pad of paper and a pencil, check everything in. Okay, it's all here. Pick it all up and put it into a sled of some sort that they use in the maintenance department. Take it all down to the main building where we are in the back door, unload it all, lay it down the hallway, and then we took it all and we put it away. This happened 3 times a week. So if you think having the trucks not able to get to your spot, that didn't work out as well as we thought it did. But we got through it. We had no issues there. One fond memory, one of my kids, one of our kids, Rob, sorry, Chelsea, I think at the age of 4 or 5 years old, was just going to start skiing. The first day, put the skis on. She's out in front of the Hatter House or whatever it is, and I come out and she's bent over and she's pushing on her boots. I said, "What are you doing?" She goes, "I'm trying to get the skis to go. Where's the button that makes them go?" I said, "You got to go talk to somebody in the ski school because that's not how this is going to work." She was classic. It was great. So there isn't a whole lot more. I mean, I'd be happy, obviously, to bounce things back and forth as we go. I know, I'm pretty sure there may be people out here we did parties for. I know we've done weddings over the years, and unfortunately we've done funerals and we've done everything else. So, and even more than just a King Ridge. So that's kind of what I mean. I'm not the oldest one here. It was brought at King Ridge, but I was the last one standing, so to speak. So.
Thank you, Bob. Wonderful. Before we move on from one retiree to another, newly retirees, question for you all. Does anybody know who named King Ridge? Who came up with the name King Ridge? No, Ben, you're exempt from this. Yes.
Actually, Pete Lorison did.
You are exactly right. So, introducing my Uncle Pete Lorison, who did name King Ridge, but did not come up
With the theme of Alice in Wonderland. So, over to Pete.
And his paper was in the local newspaper with Dr. Clough, congratulating him and giving him, I don't know what you got, Pete, but...
Key, thank you. That's Key Clough and Bill Clough behind. And Bill Clough was the one that got it started with financially and through the outing club. So we've got some real old timers here compared to myself. I will, Key, go ahead. Would you like this?
One more little story. I came from Sweden and was a au pair girl at a family called Giddings. Gusta Giddings later to teach, but Gusta and Dr. Clough worked together a lot on these trails. So all over the living room floor were trail patterns and how it was all gonna go. And every once in a while they really get mad at one another. And I can remember Gusta saying to Dr. Bell, "For God's sake, Bell, that's not the way we're gonna do it." And I went to my mother-in-law and I said, "Oh my gosh, they're never gonna be friends again." Nothing to it, it goes over it like a breeze. But those were the early days.
Thank you. So I'm going to reverse things a little bit here. One thing I would like to say as a director on board here is that it's so nice to see so many people come to this. We've had, I can't remember how many Cracker Barrels, 3 or 4 over the years. David Kidder and myself did the first 1 or 2. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. I feel very honored to be able to be up here and talk about something that I know very well, as well as the Ice House. So, but I'll back up a little bit on how I named King Ridge. All right. So you've got to remember, in '61 I was 10, I think, or 11, whatever. 10, and I'd been brought up down on the eastern slopes at Pleasant Lake on Bunker Road skiing. I mean, I don't remember when I first started skiing there. And of course, with my dad being, our dad being ski school director and ski patrolman and head groomsperson, and I don't think he cooked, but to think of the transition that we had from being there to this new place on King Hill was, like, to me, giant. And they even had bathrooms with running water. Sometimes, yeah, as long as we didn't run out of water, which used to happen some. But as I remember growing up and down there is that, you know, we had two holers on the side of the hill down near close to the lodge, and so, you know, you stayed away from there unless you really had to use them. So that was one thing in going up and having the plumbing, as I said before. Thinking of the lifts, Bill Taylor, who worked for Dr. Clough on the farm as well, ran the old ski tow, which was a truck that was jacked up. The first one was jacked up on and the rope ran around the shivs on the back wheel, and then went all the way to the top. And so as a lift attendant, he would sit inside the old Chevy truck, I think it was, with a heater and the defroster on, and watch everybody fall getting on. What's that, Debbie? GMC, there you go. Okay, thanks, Bill. Close. So there was quite a time going through that. So as a kid, and I remember learning how to get on the lift. I'm not sure that I really remember, but I remember my best buddy, Ben Cochran, and he was my age, and the rope usually would go down and it would be so heavy that as little kids, it was pretty hard to get it up off the ground and then be able to grab a hold of it, and all of a sudden, zoom, take off. And so, you'd see more people spin out and then go back and get their skis back on and go back down and try it again. And I remember Ben being quite scared of it, but you got the hang of it. Yeah, again and again, up and down, up and down. But he was a good athlete. I wasn't, so he caught right onto it pretty well.
Is it a good time to talk about Ben or Scott Wheeler?
It would be perfect. So that's a good one. So here we had this primitive GMC truck jacked up, which was one of the first lifts, and there were two there, and then they eventually changed over to Cat diesel motors. But when one day the truck blew up, and then things kind of went to hell for a little bit. So there was a safety gate at the top, but from the bottom you could not see the top of the lift, and there was no lift attendant up there, and it wasn't required at that time. So there were two old Model A Ford wheels on shivs up at the top, and the rope would go up, it would come off the snow, go up, go around those, and then it would return back down, and there were wheels on trees and posts. And then it would come back around. It would go all day long. Once in a while, the rope would break, and they had, I remember Bill, I think it was Bill Taylor and somebody else knew how to splice a rope, which had to be long, because otherwise you'd have a big knot when you went through your hands there. So, and everything would stop. So, I mean, that was part of it. So, what I'm getting at, or what Ben Cochran's talking about, is that we were all, I don't know, 6 or 7 or 8 or something like that, and a kid named Scott Wheeler, who lived in town, and later became a state trooper in town. He's well retired now. So he's going up the lift, and we all had those nylon pullover jackets without any quilting in them. And, well, when you went up, the rope would do this as it was going, because it was going through the shivs and back. Well, if you weren't careful, it would get caught here, and it would wind up. And if you slipped back a little bit and you didn't have it tight, it made it even worse. So Scotty gets on and goes up and gets caught in the rope. And the safety gate was just an extension cord that went underneath. And then when you hit it, it would unplug it, and then it would shut it down. So it was I think it was a busy weekend anyway, down there. And so all of a sudden my dad said, I think that somebody's caught in the bull wheel up top. And so of course he couldn't get up there. There was no snowmobile or anything. So he ran up, and Scott had gotten caught. And luckily, when he hit bruised him pretty badly, but ripped his shell right off. And he landed, it wasn't that high, but he landed in the snow below it. And so his dad was an engineer. And so after that, anyway, Scott went home, and I remember playing with Matchbox toys and bringing him some gifts over while he was in bed recuperating. But anyway, his dad was an engineer, and so he devised a better or revised a better safety gate, so that and the little guys go right over the top of it. Of course, we never thought that would ever happen, but it did. So, but that was the lift thing. The other thing that I really remember is that on Saturday morning, if it had snowed on Friday night or Saturday night, and it was Sunday morning, and it was free, all the kids would go down and ski. And so if you got down there, you had to boot pack or sidestep up to pack it out, because we had no groomers. And so there was a roller that Dad used to use. But so anyway, so if you showed up and it was time, you had to make sure that you walked up with everybody else, or if you got a little bit late, there was a whole other patch there that was left for, hey, over there, And I remember Dr. Oler and the kids were having so many children and trying to get their stuff together, which they lived the closest of anybody. And I remember them showing up, and my dad going, you all go over here, Olers, you got to do that before you ski. So But so the grooming was a total different way of doing it, and I'm getting off the King Ridge thing, but I'm trying to make it, in my mind, the difference between of primitive skiing to modern skiing at the time. And if you look in the building, that's the first building, the Ford building, there's a military Jeep in there, and that was, Bill Kidder had bought that after World War II. And so when, in January, when we didn't have any snow and it got really hard and icy, Dad would borrow it from Bill, had put tire chains on it, and then put a spike tooth harrow on it, and he'd run up and down the slopes to try to chew it up until we got more snow. And I remember going down there because I remember Mom making dinner, you know, because he was there, and there was no heater, or if there was a rag top on it and all that. And you'd see these headlights, and to see the difference between that and then going to King Ridge and having a Bombardier the first year we were there, which was there for almost the whole time that King Ridge was open. It was a quite sturdy machine. And then it went to groomers and snowcats and all of that. So, but there were just so many differences. For instance, the restaurant, King Ridge, the original building at King Ridge was I guess the Mad Hatter House at the end, which had the A-frame in it. And that was it had a concession, and Marge Thompson and Mrs. Parker and a bunch of them all, worked there, making eclairs and having hot dogs and hamburgers, and it always smelled so good when you came up the East Side T-Bar. But down at the old Rope Tow, there was a lodge, which was a hut, which was probably 40 feet long. I can't remember. It seemed big to me. One story with a board floor and a wood stove, and you'd walk in there, and all you could smell is burned leather because everybody was putting their gloves on the stove. And then, some guys would get a little bit smart, like Hayden Wright, I think it was, and he'd go over there and put silver wax on the stovepipe and melt it, and it would smell like wax in there. But and then they added a small, I bet you it was no more than 6 by 8 or 10 extension on it, and there was that was where they had the grill, a gas grill, and not what we're thinking of gas grill today, propane grill. Whatever you use in the restaurant business. And it was Arthur Prescott, actually, and Mrs. Prescott. I remember them running that. And there was a little piece of plywood or something that flipped down, and it was like a little shelf, and you'd go up there and you'd get your hamburgers and hot dogs, or to order. And there was the pop was the orange soda and whatever. But and then when we got to King Ridge, you had soda fountains eventually and all that stuff. So it was quite a transition. And the ski patrol, all it was my dad, as I remember, and there was a toboggan up top that was left up there, and have to get up and carry whoever it was down. And if you were good enough to be able to get back up and get down, you didn't have to go on that damn thing. But it was quite a thing. But one of the things, there was not much of a parking area there. There was a little pull-off that you could pull off to and unload, and then there was a stairway that was made into the side of the mountain and into the hill from the parking lot. And actually, this is a little story that's getting off of King Ridge, but this was before again. And there's a movie that P.D. Kidder had taken of Billy and David coming down with their skis over their shoulders down the steps, and they were slippery, and back then we had leather boots, ski boots. And here we go, and all of a sudden Billy his feet go out from underneath him on the top of the stairs and go bang, 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 bang. And David just kind of walks off and smiles like that. It's somewhere on one of the movies, I'm not sure where, but so what I was getting at is that at the time it was pretty convenient for Colby Jr. students to be able to come down because they could ski through the woods, which is where, is it not, what's Carfield? What's the name of the field? It's Kelsey Field. and there was a trailway that went down. It wasn't a real trail. It was pastures and barways and whatever. And we used to, after Sunday school, ski down there once in a while if we were good. But so the whole system was, to get back to the name, all I can remember is they had a contest, and what they had was just a contest for a name, and Blueberry Ridge and Juniper Ridge, and as a kid, all I could think of is, here's this, King Hill, and it's a real ski area, or that's what we thought it was going to be. So I named it Kings Ridge. I had an S on it, and eventually when they really started, they took off the S, so it was King Ridge. And it was, I don't know whether Bill Bardsley was there on the first, I think he was managing it the first year. Was he?
Yeah. There's a picture in that booklet of him.
Oh, yes.
It's him, Bill Kidder, and Bill Clough, I think.
Yeah, Bill Clough.
Trying to figure out where the trails are going to go.
The directors up on the top of the Queen's Run.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So, as I said, that was how I thought about it as far as the name King Ridge, and I didn't have anything to do with Alice in Wonderland, but it turned out to be a wonderful thing. One other thing that I should say here, that a lot of you skied at King Ridge, and some of you down at the old rope tow, when they transferred the rope tows up to King Ridge and eventually put J-bars in and took them out, which was on that same slope that you used to have to take the stuff down, Bob, to the new lodge, because the lodge wasn't there at that point. So they had they moved the Cat Diesel power plant from the old rope tow to the middle of that slope, and then the rope ran down to the bottom of that slope, and then for more novice skiing up top, it was a little bit flatter, and it ran out of the other end of that building. But if you were a novice and you didn't know how to stop, you went a long way down before you could stop. So, but wonderful memories. I do have a few memories of, as Laurie was talking about, I remember the first day that they cut the road in from King Hill Road. One day they cut, I can't remember who did it, but they cut by hand up to where the racket club goes in now. And then each day they would go along, and as you say, almost every night that there was a trail, we'd go over and see what the progress was, whether it was the King's Run or whether it was the T-bar, and to go on a mechanical lift that you could stand up and be pulled up instead of being on the rope tow was quite an improvement. So, but that was our life. I mean, that was our life at the old rope tow, and it was our life up there growing up, and that's what we did. So it was quite a time. And you have another question, which is later on, that I'm going to talk about, right?
God, I can't wait. Which one?
Well, I'll wait, because I don't want to. I'll let you go back, MC.
Yeah.
And but thank you all for. Oh, we have a question, Ben.
Did you get a free season pass for
Oh yes. So I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't finish my thought there. So I won a free season pass for naming it King Ridge. Yeah. And there's an article. I could not find it. I thought I had it on the wall, and it shows Dr. Bill in his office up at Woodcrest now, which was the old homestead, and the Argus Champion, and it was an article of him giving me the season pass, which was worth, I believe, $25 at the time. So.
The article is over.
Oh, is it there? Okay. Well, maybe that's where it went. I couldn't find that, so.
I think that's a photo of me.
Oh, yeah.
We'll get you one for Christmas. We got them.
Thank you. So, I will sit down, and it's a wonderful thing, and I'm so glad that you're here to enjoy it. I hope you are. I hope this isn't too long. And there was a request to do this about King Ridge, so. Oh, Michael Todd.
Yes. I think we do want to get some mics back to people who want to speak so that we can catch it on film. Perfect. got it? Okay, Uncle Pete's going to
Thank
bring
you all.
Sorry, Pete, and everyone, I'm sorry I'm here so late. I missed the presentation, but I didn't hear from one person that was here that anyone had mentioned that Bill Bardsley had passed away, and his service is at Proctor Academy on the 19th of August. It was in the paper. So he was the manager at King Ridge for, well, as long as I can remember.
His kids are here.
Yeah, a very long
Yeah.
time. So any of you want to go and pay your respects, it's August 19th at Proctor Academy. Thank you. Pardon?
11 a.m.
11 a.m.
Thanks, Michael. Before we hand it over to you all, because we do want to hear from you, I do want to give a special thank you to John McKenna, who very, very graciously donated the ski school jackets that are out for raffle outside. Also, much of the memorabilia that is in here, including all of the costumes, the maps, the postcards, the buttons out front. John had the forethought on the auction day to go through the dumpster and started pulling boxes out, and I had the opportunity to visit his barn over the weekend and haul things out. So thank you very much, John. Very much appreciated. John was involved in the ski school and children's program, and he shared some stories with me over the weekend that were really lovely, so thank you, John. And if anybody has not purchased a raffle ticket, now is your time to go, because we are going to pull them at the end of this. Question: did anybody here meet anybody at King Ridge that you still have in your life today? Annie Ballin. Who would that be, Annie? Yeah, your husband wants to know. Who else? Anybody else? Oh, Uncle Pete, huh?
Yes, probably the best part of King Ridge, now that I'm thinking about it. My wife Heidi was a Colby Junior College student and had come up from the Berkshires in Pittsfield, Mass, and she came looking for a job with my folks in the ski school during the breaks for Colby Junior. So my dad, there's a little story here, and I'll tell you. So my dad went, he said, I don't want to hire any Colby girls because every time there's a holiday, they want to go home and they're never around. So he interviewed Heidi and took her out to just see how she skied and wanted to know what her ability for teaching was. And immediately he said, he says, you ski just like one of his Canadian examiner from the Canadian Ski Alliance. And he said, you ski just like Court McDermott. And she said, well, that's who I work for. And so anyway, I had my eye on her for a while. We both had significant others for a while. And anyway, it finally happened after she moved down to Boston and went to BU. So, she just took care of our grandchildren today, and I think she's exhausted, so I don't know if she's going to be here. But she knows the story anyway.
Is there anybody else? All right. I do want to say, I know Putnam talked about the sprees. Will reminded me earlier that they actually ended up banning sprees, and they would no longer carry them because of what was happening with them under the lifts, which is very funny. All right, we want to open it up to you all. Who's got some stories? Dan Wolf. You got it, Will? Thank you.
I was involved at the end, and it was a pretty sad time. Johnny Mack tried to help put it together after the bank got sold out to some Canadian fellows, and they weren't going to support King Ridge anymore. It was a sad time. But I do have a gift for everybody. My wife is happy that I cleaned another box, or part of a box out of the garage. So I'll pass these around. I only have a few, one per couple, but these are the original King Ridge pins. So you can all have one. I'll pass them around, but I was there at the end, and I kept Oh, God. Yeah, well, I had a nice house that Charlie Whittemore built for me, and we had, my wife wanted a skylight over the bed, and it was very romantic, and I was happy, and things were pretty good back then in the early 90s. And, yeah. Gary, we're not going there. So I remember, and when we bought King Ridge, John and a bunch of us put together and tried to take it out of bankruptcy. And I'm lying in bed on Christmas Eve of '93, I think it was, and all I remember is the rain pouring down on that God-forsaken skylight. And I said, that's it, we're out of the ski business. And, but anyway, we had a good time. Bubba kept things going, and we had a lot of good food. If we didn't have a lot of fresh snow, at least we had hot dogs and corn chowder, your Bubba's chowder. So, but anyway, I'll pass these around if anybody wants one on the way out.
Thank you, Dan.
I've got some other goodies. I did have a hat that I got. This is one of the things I got out of an autographed King Ridge hat. And Bubba, you got one now. You wearing it? You got a staff. Yeah. There's a few of them kicking around. So, but thank you. And I'll just pass these around. Just take one and pass them back in.
I have some pins and coins too for anybody who doesn't get them from Dan.
Yeah, Bob's got a question for everyone.
Everybody remembers racing down the hill? Remember the summers when something else was going on up the hill? Remember the car racing going on?
Larry Ballin.
Sports car racing up the hill?
Sports car racing.
Oh, yeah. Come up that last little bit and launched themselves into the parking lot pretty good. But,
Wow.
that was, I can't remember, when was that? What the years was that? Anybody remember? Late 60s.
Late 60s. Wow. Perfect. Yes.
I have a story I think it's awesome. I have a story I think you might enjoy. The building of the lodge at King Ridge, my time is, my brother Stu was prior to King Ridge, so we were elephant skiers. But 60, I think it was, I was working for a guy named Wilfred Hastings in Renton. And he used to run a company called Blue Mountain Construction Company. And we got the job to build a new lodge on top of King Ridge, which was a pretty big deal. So I signed up with him and worked that winter, and we had the coldest winter anyone could imagine. Shingling that roof was one thing to do. I'm thinking about it right now. And Wilfred, the company owner, brought a case of bourbon and we finished it. A case of bourbon, not a bottle. We had a colorful electrician here named Harold Welch. Harold did the electrical work in that building. And Harold got involved with that case of bourbon, as all of us did. And he lost his truck. He could not find his truck for 3 days. Harold was the kind of guy, you wanted to find out whether he had live breakfast, and you just stick his finger in it. Nothing crazy. 3 days looking for his truck, I think, I don't know if that's ever happened before. It's found it up in Grantham.
Thank you, Bill. Bill Clough. Yeah. Gary Robinson.
A lot of you people don't know, but I was the Mad Hatter. And still am. I still am the Mad Hatter. I moved into New London 1975 with my bride, Joan. And I grew up skiing at Cannon Mountain. I was a Cannon Mountain skier. I wasn't going to ski at King Ridge. So I had my pass for Sunapee, and I had my pass for Cannon. I'd ski 2 or 3 days at Sunapee and run up to Cannon. And then a few years later, we started to have a family. We had 3 beautiful children. And of course, King Ridge was perfect.
to bring the kids up to King Ridge, and I think they all started skiing up there when they were 3 or 4 years old, and when they went to school, my wife would pick them up and bring them up there for race training or whatever they were doing, the snow fleas. I can't remember what it was. And then, you know, we were a young family, and I decided, well, I'm going to work up at King Ridge and get those season passes so I get those kids on the slope. And so I started to teach at the mountain. And then one day, Bob Martin and John Varell came up with this idea of the Mad Hatter. And for some reason, they thought I'd be perfect and convinced me to put on that 8-foot suit, which, by the way, was only comfortable if it was 10 below zero, because it's completely foam. I would get in there, basically, I had a T-shirt and a pair of shorts, and that's what I'd ski in. And that. So I have 2 or 3 really small but funny stories at King Ridge. One, we talked about Northrop. Steve Northrop. So it's a beautiful spring day, and Steve was a pretty good skier, you know, and he was proud of how he skied. And he was coming down the Mad Hatter, and he didn't have his hat on. And he's skiing up and down that Mad Hatter, and everybody's pointing at him and looking at him. What Steve didn't know is Steve liked the comb over, you know, and every time he hit a bump, his hair went up in the air. and everybody looked at him. So that's one story. And then, I don't know if you remember Gordon Keeler. Old Gordon was down, he worked up at the mountain, great guy, and it was Martin Luther King Day. And of course, you know, at that time, it wasn't hard for the mountain to sell out. So Gordon, Martin Luther King Day comes up afterwards, and of course, at one point, John Varell called down to Gordon and said, you know, we got to cut it off now. We got the place is filled, no place for another car. And who pulls up but a car of African Americans? The first ones ever came up, and Gordon said, I couldn't turn them away. And he let them up the hill. And then the last story, because it was a family ski area, we got a call one time going up on the old triple, and there was a young romantic couple who thought that they had skied far enough in the woods that no one would see them. Well, they was hot and heavy, took off all the ski clothes, and of course, everybody's looking at them, so Bob Martin and I were sent on patrol. We had to follow their trail through the woods and tell the young couple, family ski area. And, you know, my kids still talk about King Ridge. They loved it. It was an extraordinary experience for my family. I come from an old ski family, generations, and I was mistaken when I said, "Oh, I'm never going to ski King Ridge," but I miss it. I miss it dearly. It was a great ski area, and I appreciate the history. I mean, I grew up on a rope tow too, so it's great. Thank you.
Hi. So I brought a picture of my family from 1962 in ski attire up at King Ridge. So we have skied since almost its inception. One of my fondest memories is with my husband. We've been together. Yeah, a long time. I believe it was in '82. I brought him up to King Ridge. I had introduced him to New London. He was from Connecticut. And we went skiing on Valentine's Day. And the trees had hearts of red and lace and stars. And all the characters were skiing that day. The snowflakes were huge. It was a perfect day that will be in our hearts forever. And my last one is the 3 new trails, the triple chairlift. That was my grandfather's property, Dr. John Logan. And he sold them or gave, I never quite got that story straight, to the resort. And in thanking my grandfather and grandmother. The executive team at the time wanted to throw them a little thank you. So in a warming lodge on one of the trails up at the Triple Chairlift, they had a little reception. Well, my grandmother, so you know, she never wore pants a day in her life, and she had high heels and stockings and you know, the old girdle and some kind of coat on, and they were like, how are we going to get her there? So we took, I don't even remember exactly how we got there. All the people who know the lifts will know how we got there, but we went up one and down another, and then they took her on some kind of conveyance to get to the Triple Chairlift, and they put her on that with my grandfather, and we got up, and then there was a little walk down to the warming hut, and we got there, and big guys in big coats were like guiding her the whole way. It was a lovely little reception. There was a bottle of champagne and a warming stove. And when it was all done, she turns around and she goes, Johnny, this is where we're living now. So that's my story of King Ridge.
Thank you for sharing. Ben Cochran.
And so Bob touched on this. Well, actually, though, I couldn't help but think that the Valentine's thing might have left the tracks off the trail that he was on. But Bob touched on it earlier about how the advantage of having an upside down ski area and you know, drive up and then ski down and walk up. Well, my father-in-law, Don Lowe, and his buddy, Bob Rose, never skied much, but every year they kind of like to take one or two runs. So we'd drive them up to the top of the parking lot, and they'd ski down to Mock Turtle and then work their way over to the trail that went through the woods down to Hominy Pot Road by the Big Rock, and we pick them up and do it maybe one or two more times, and they got their skiing in for the year.
Thank you. Anybody? Oh, Michael Todd.
Seeing my classmate Bo Muller up here reminds me of one story. When I was in high school, it was in the middle of winter, and of course at nighttime the parking lot was completely empty. And somehow Bo got a hold of his sister's Pontiac GTO 4-speed and picked me up, and we went up into that parking lot, and that car had so much power, in the middle of the parking lot you just put it into third gear and let the clutch out, and the car would start going like this across the parking lot. And I can remember sitting in the back seat looking out at the rearview mirror and just seeing the snowbanks going by like this, and you know, Bo at the helm. You know, we didn't hit anything, but it was just the most bizarre thing I can remember, is seeing those snowbanks just going around. It's great. Donuts, exactly, yeah. And the other story I remember about Gordon Keeler is, you know, Bo and I were just ski rats. We just hung around the place all the time, and we got bored skiing on regular length skis, so we fabricated these shorties of all different lengths, short skis like about maybe 2 feet long. And we were hanging around the shop one day, and Gordon had about enough of me anyway, and so it was in the spring skiing, end of the season. And he said, Mike, he said, I got an idea. I want you to test something for me. So he got out his hot wax, and he hot waxed one ski with silver and the other one with straight paraffin. And he said, I want you to take a couple of runs and tell me which one works best. Every time you put that silver ski down, you just kind of did a 180, you know. It was yeah, that cured Gordon of us, for me anyway, for the rest of the day.
Thank you, Michael. And I understand Debbie Perkins is here and would like to say a few words. Absolutely.
Okay, great. So I'll just start a little story about myself first skiing, and then I want to talk about the reason that I think we're all here, how we all learned to ski, Bud Lauritsen. Some of us can think way long way back. My earliest memories of skiing are in a gently sloping field behind my grandmother Lamson's home on North Pleasant Street in New London. My skis were completely wooden except for the metal toe plate holding the leather strap, which I assumed was designed to keep my boot attached to the ski. I spent a lot of time looking down and praying it would all hold together for just a few more moments of a wonderful glide. 2 noble deer stared right back at me up from my skis and giving me courage not to give up. Eventually someone mentioned jar rubbers would be the answer. I made the request from my grandmother's canning cupboard and began to experiment with the stiff rubber rings. The only successful application was to run the ring completely over the ski and my boot. My boot finally stayed on, attached to the ski, but of course I could no longer glide. I wasn't very tall or very bright. How many remember the smell of wet, scorched mittens drying by a wood stove upon the hearth or in one of our area's earliest ski huts and lodges? King Ridge comes to mind. All the functions were in one building, main lodge with the wonderful steamed-up windows, ski school in one corner, ski fair in another, nursery in a third, 3-seated ticket booth with only one cafeteria, the delicious aroma into the atmosphere, big smoky fireplace, ski patrol housed in a cubby under the deck, various lifts and the characters who operated them, sugar on snow, sleigh rides, night skiing, friends who gathered to visit along the Mock Turtle in the late afternoon sun, the marvelous junior ski program, which has afforded hundreds and hundreds of people of all ages for a lifetime. Actually, I'm describing the lodge of the Perkins childhood. Mine was a bit more primitive, but it too had its smells of scorched wool mittens. I was down at Pleasant Lake, of course. Tickets sold from the cab of a surplus World War II truck, which also served as a power source for the rope tow of the New London Outing Club ski slopes along Bunker Road above Pleasant Lake. All these images, sights, sounds, and smells there has been for me remind me of a constant, one constant, Bud Lordson. Bud Lordson graduated from Yale University with a degree in fine arts. His interests and talents are numerous. I'm reading this as if I were presenting a program for him. I did introduce him many times. He wanted me to do it always because I told the best lies, he said. He is an extraordinary person, an original Renaissance, who could do and has done remarkable things. The Historical Society Village of 1830 buildings was envisioned and flourished his guidance, gentle persuasion, and personal dedication to purpose. Bud doesn't lead people, they have to run to catch up with him. Most of his hobbies have evolved into vocations. He has bought, sold, refinished, restored, formed collections of antiques. He's done the same with vintage autos and trucks. He has taught at the preparatory school and college levels. For many years, he served as fire chief. The signs he has painted were signatures. He has made ski area ski school. Most recently, Bud's second love. Aid is his first, that of painting exquisite still lifes. Bud is a good friend and neighbor, always generous with enthusiasm and vision. His ability to define and refine has led himself and others into areas of accomplishment they never expected was possible. If Bud had been along with the Donner Party in the winter of 1846-47 in the Sierra Nevadas, they would have made it through the pass, and their descendants would be making wine and movies in California today. When Bud, at age 27, began teaching mechanical drawing and boat building at Proctor Academy, one of the requirements was also to teach a sport. The only winter sport at the time was skiing, which Bud had never done. The Renaissance man found some wool socks, wool pants, borrowed skis, taught himself to ski so he could fulfill his duties. I, for one, am so happy this happened, as eventually Bud came to teach the sport in New London. I, among many others, became his ski student. Bud taught me to ski from the time I was a youngster through to my Colby Junior College years, on a field trip to Big Mount Sunapee area brought me to face with a tall, dark, handsome stranger who would become my husband. Bud taught me through the many Jude program years when chant and my 4 children learned to ski, and even after they had gone on to higher grades and higher hills. Bud taught me to ski every year for 30 years, and every year he taught a different technique. We snowplowed by making an apple pie shape wedge with our feet long before anyone in New London had ever seen a pizza wedge. We imagined holding big steering wheels, cranked them to the right, and we turned to the right, cranked the other way. Well, you get the picture. It worked. Next, we pulled one shoulder back, thrust the opposite shoulder around in the direction of the new turn. It also worked. Later, we would weight one foot and unweight the opposite one, causing a turn. That worked, too. Then we rose up and planted a pole, coming down in the direction of the pole plant, and whoosh, perfect turn. Every year, it all worked, and it was so much fun. I recall one junior ski program morning when Bud took our parents' class out for our 9 a.m. lesson. It was sparkling, crisp morning, beautiful the way the ice clung to every branch and needle. As we made our way to the head wall of the Nave of Hearts, we suddenly became aware that we were the first of anything to have approached this particular portion of the frozen landscape. We looked down the steep slope, sheathed in ice. We glanced at one another, and at our leader, back at us. Would we have planted our hold? Would we wait and unweight? At that moment, our gaze across the frozen dilemma to Route 89 in the valley below. There we saw a VW Bug gently rocking back and forth on its roof. At this point, Bud gave us our instructions and demonstrated the technique of removing our skis, walking back to the lodge for hot chocolate to await the effects of a few hours of sun that would have on the frozen trails. This Donner Party got to a second chance. Thanks, Bud. Thanks for everything.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Debbie. Are there any other stories to be shared? Does anyone remember the name of the ski school building? The Caboose. The Caboose. Yes, the ski school locker room. Well, if there are no other stories, we actually could stay for breakfast if we want. If we want to keep talking.
Before Pete goes,
yeah.
I want to say the rest of the story. Everybody likes to talk about how much fun it was to bring their kids up and drop them off for the day, because it was such a great spot and all that stuff. But the rest of the story, 10 minutes after you dropped your kid off, you called my office. Hey, Bubba, can you get a 10 spot? You can cover lunch for my kid today. I bought every one of you guys lunch, and I wonder, some of you still owe me $1 or $2.
Oh, Ashley, I thought that we'd thought of everything, or you thought of everything, but after Debbie's talk and speech, I really need some Kleenex up here. That was really heartfelt. Very, very nice. To go back to Gordon Keeler, Gordon married a woman from Germany who I think came over here with Key. I'm not sure. Same time, yes.
For Dr. John and Priscilla, and I was at the Giddings house, and we would get together. They had 6 children, and I had 6 children.
So they were both here, both families, and so Karen, I don't know whether, I think she knew how to ski when she was here, when she started. But anyway, my dad would take, as Debbie was saying, Friday afternoon, or no, I guess they had clinics for all of the parents that would go out and teach the kids on Friday afternoons. And so there was a group of parents that had gone out, and I believe this is how it goes. They were on the Mock Turtle, and if anybody remembers King Ridge, it was the big open slope that went to the farthest to the King Hill side of the road there. And it was fairly gentle. There was a mound on there that everybody would stop at, and we used to call it the social mogul, because you'd go down and then everybody gather there, and it was very social. But to go back to Karen, so Karen had a fairly thick German accent, and she was partway down with a group and couldn't make it back to the lodge, to the restroom, and so she said, "Bud, can I go in the woods here?" And he said, "Well, why not?" And so all of a sudden they're out on the slope, and Karen had dropped her pants and everything, and somehow got caught in that position and skied right out. So that was it. And later she married Gordon, and that's all that. And there was another one about their son, Jeff. Jeff turned into a guy that was 6'4", I guess, handsome guy, loved to ski, and he was over there before he was in school, so I don't know if it was kindergarten or what. So he'd ski the whole time. He was 3 or 4 years old, and he would go down to the bottom of the double chairlift, which is where Ralph Graham was, and so Ralph would be down there, and he'd get on and go up, and man, he would be back down before he could possibly get to the top, but they couldn't figure it all out. So finally Ralph talked to the ski patrol. He said, "This kid is, he's down here so quick, I can't understand how he's getting to the top and then coming down." So the ski patrol decided that they'd kind of park along the edge of where the chairlift goes up, and they went in through the trees. It was fairly low. And they caught him. He was jumping off the chairlift and partway up and going back down again. So I think he was only like 5 or 6. So, but anyway, that's the Keeler story. So, but Debbie, thank you so much for what you said. That was very heartfelt.
Yeah, Carlin. So I recently learned that in addition to skiing at the mountain, we were not always the best behaved teenagers, and so we would figure out a way to get back up to the top of the mountain after it closed. And this last story reminded me of somebody who told me how the police chief at one point came to them and said, "You really need to not use those trays to sled down the King Hill Road." And it was another one of Jeff's friends who liked jumping out of the chairlift with him. No names to be mentioned. Thank you. Well, I think we are just about at 90 minutes. Thank you all for coming.